The Last Jedi was a particularly divisive film in the Star Wars franchise, and it was a big turn-off for many fans of the IP, both long-term and new. So with the news that Episode 9 would be releasing 2 years later, people were either frustrated that it either wouldn't live up to that film, or they were going in already annoyed that Disney would dare tarnish the franchise further. But let's be real, very few people were actually going in out of excitement for the movie, compared to either group previously mentioned. So The Rise of Skywalker opened, and nobody really liked it. Fans of TLJ were irritated because the film walked back on many of the setups, or shut-ups, of that film, and sane people were annoyed because it failed to conclude this already messy trilogy with any meaning or gravitas. And since then, users of Twitter, Reddit, and various other virtual representations of literal trash have not really shut up about it. But that's ultimately for good reason. Say what you want about TLJ, and there's more to say about that than why German foreign policy in the 1930s is considered intrusive, but at least that film brought about interest in more objective analysis in media, and also brought massive attention to the Star Wars franchise, though not in the way it had anticipated. That film is fun to mock, make fun of. Of course, it did lead to harassment of some cast and crew members, which is not cushy, but the film itself is remarkably interesting, and any conversation had about it, regardless of its outcome, is always entertaining. So many things about it to talk about. The characterization, or its failed attempts at it, the butchering of universal rules, the subversions, the themes, gestures hands furiously. There's so much to dissect that people have literally made careers off of how bad it is. With the release of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson showed that he is to Star Wars what Courtney Love is to Nirvana. The Rise of Skywalker, on the other hand, is just sad. It's the death throes of a trilogy that had devastating internal creative conflicts and the final nail in the coffin of a franchise that has already competently seen to the disinterest of millions of people. The Rise of Skywalker rewrote the previous 2 films in the trilogy it was supposed to conclude, and in the process irritated people who loved the previous 2 films, people who hated TLJ, people who hated the previous 2 films. It really did try to please absolutely everyone, and in the process just rubbed dried stinking crap in our faces and called it fan service. There's probably just as much to pick apart with TROS as there is with TLJ, but it's just less fun due to the sheer desperation that drips from every mouldy orifice of The Rise of Skywalker. It's desperate to appeal to those turned off by TLJ. It's desperate to try and wrap up this tumultuous trilogy. It's desperate to appeal to fans of the OT. The only group it doesn't appeal to, and in fact appears to openly disdain, is fans of The Last Jedi. Which, as fun as it is to mock people who think that film is avant-garde Star Wars, it's probably not the place of that film's sequel to just flip off those true believers. It all just reeks of shame, which I guess is unique to this franchise. The OT is beloved, the prequel trilogy is widely regarded as fun with good elements, if clumsy, inconsistent, and all-round not very well done. But the sequel trilogy... Man, the sequel trilogy. Like a new flatmate with a snuff film obsession, it came in appearing alright at first glance, but soon enough caused problem after problem, and eventually just led to the death of, well, something alright. And it smells a little of mud and narcissism. So yeah, 1 year later, TROS remains sad, smelly, and a source of laughter. Not to mention the greatest case in point of what happens when you don't have a plan for your story. Guys, the prequels have numerous problems, mainly due to the writing, the acting, storytelling, dialogue, just general things. These issues could be addressed if you rewrote the entire script, basically. A big ask, but doable. The problem that is widely identified with the sequel trilogy is far more fundamental and basic. They didn't have a plan before making it. That is pretty embarrassing for a studio this big and a name this beloved. The prequels have multiple compounding problems that add up to show that it was just clear that nobody was countering George Lucas. The sequels started off with a massive problem, and the problems became apparent 2 years later, only to be crystallized by the end of the trilogy. The bar was on the ground, folks, yet you somehow turned into Mole from Atlantis and disturbed the dirt. I.e. went under the bar and ended up annoying, insulting, and ultimately disappointing absolutely everyone in the underground fan club. That deserves some kind of achievement, honestly. Though I'd be concerned with the company you'd have under previous winners of that achievement. The Disney Star Wars trilogy is just a mess, and it has stayed that way 1 whole year after its conclusion, and will probably continue to be considered that for many years to come. At this point, we probably just have to admit that The Empire Strikes Back was a fluke, according to the most famous man on the planet, Richmond Evanson. That at least would make people realise Star Wars has done more bad than good in terms of movie quality. Even if the original trilogy characters will remain timeless, as long as you keep your blinders handy for whenever someone mentions what Disney did to them. Disney Star Wars is a sad story, and now all that can be said is that The Rise of Skywalker will echo in the walls of film history, but like Birth of a Nation or Uwe Boll's entire directorial career, for all the wrong reasons.